Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back. For this video, I'm going to be showing you the code behind my animated roll mechanic for my dice rolling app. All right, so here I have my project open, and real quick, we're going to play through it so that you can see the mechanic working. All right, so here I have my D20 and it's currently looping through that spin animation. And now you can see that when I click the screen, it selects a face and that face then rotates to face the camera. We also then have the number on that face highlight yellow. I can do it again, and you can see that it selects a different face, and I can do it for each one of my dice. This mechanic works for all the different dice I have. Now to create this mechanic, the first thing that I needed to do was create an empty game object, which I called animated roll. This object is just going to hold the main script for this mechanic. You can see that I already have an empty game object for the physics-based roll mechanic. I then created two scripts. The first I called animated roll, and the second I called dice. The animated roll script I attached to my empty game object, and the dice script I attached to each one of my dice game objects. So next I'll open up these scripts and I'll show you the code inside, and I'm going to start with the dice script. Now this script's pretty simple. It's really just to hold certain variables for each dice. The first variable is of type Animator, and I called it dice Animator. The next is an int called dice value. This variable holds the highest face value of each dice. Next is an array of type dice number. This is a script that I created for my physics roll mechanic. And this script pretty much just deals with each face, highlighting the text on that face and resetting it back to white. I then have an onEnable function where I'm checking to see if the singleton value of our animated roll script is not equal to null. And if it's not equal to null, then I'm setting a variable called currentDice equal to this dice. This is mostly so that when you click one of these buttons down at the bottom and you change which dice you're using, that dice is essentially selected by the Animator script so that it knows which dice you're using. And that's everything I have for this dice script, so I'll now go over to the animated roll script. Now this project is further along than just this roll mechanic. I've got other features that I've added, and so you'll see other lines of code that I'll talk about in future videos. For this animated roll mechanic, we really just need to look at these 6 variables. The first is that singleton that we're using in the dice script. This is a static variable of type animated roll, which is the same as this current script, and I've called it instance. The next is that variable that our dice script is setting in the onEnable function. And this variable is of type dice and is called currentDice. Next I have an int called roll value. This is to hold the current value that was rolled by the dice. Next is a float variable called animation state. This is for setting the blend tree so that the dice knows which face to animate to. And finally, we have 2 game object variables. One is called roll button and the other is called reset button. These variables are so that I can control which button is currently active for what state the dice is in. Next, I have an onEnable function, and the only part of this function that we need to look at for this video is this first line where I'm setting the singleton equal to this current instance of the script. After the onEnable function, I have a function which I've called roll. This function is going to be paired to the roll button in our project so that when the player clicks the screen, the dice will roll. And this is the function where all the magic happens. The first thing that I needed to do was pick a random number for what the dice will roll. So I have roll value equals random.range, and it's going between 0 and the current dice's dice value. If you remember, dice value is the highest face value on each dice. Once I had the roll value, I needed to calculate the animation state. Once again, this is the value that we're going to pass to the blend tree so that the dice knows which face to rotate to. And the equation is animation state equals 1 divided by currentDice.dice value minus 1, and we're multiplying the whole thing by roll value. Now if we go over and look at the blend tree for the D4 dice, you'll notice that we have 4 different states for the 4 different numbers that a D4 can roll. And here you can see the different thresholds for rolling each number. To roll a 1, we need a 0. To roll a 2, we need 1/3. To roll a 3, we need 2/3, and to roll a 4, we need 1. And so if dice value is 4 for the d4 dice, 1 divided by 4 would give you 1/4, not 1/3. And so we need to minus 1 so that we're getting 1/3. We're then multiplying it by the roll value. So if the roll value is 0, then we'll get a 0, which will roll a 1. If the roll value is 1, then we'll get 1/3, which will give us 2. If the roll value is 2, then we'll get 2/3, which will give us a 3. And if the roll value is 3, we'll get 1, which will give us a 4. Once we have these two values, we then need to set the different parameters in our animator. So I have currentDice.DiceAnimator.setFloat, and I'm setting the state, which is the parameter that our BlendTree uses, and I'm passing in animation state. I then have currentDice.DiceAnimator.setTrigger, and I'm passing in roll. This will transition the dice from the looping spin animation to the blend tree. After this, I'm disabling the roll button, and then I'm invoking this enable reset button function in 1 second from now. This will give the dice time to animate before we allow the user to reset the dice. So let's look at that function. Here I have this enable reset button function. And inside the function, I have this line of code which is highlighting the face that's pointed towards the camera. And that is currentDice.faces, which is that array I created, which holds the script for each face on the dice. This script has this highlight number function, which basically just sets the color of the text object equal to yellow. I actually showed this function in a previous video. And so I'm using the roll value to know which text object I want to highlight, and then I'm calling that highlight number function on that text object. And then the last line inside this function is just to enable the reset button. Next, I have a public function which I called reset. This function is going to be paired to the reset button. Inside this reset function, I'm calling currentDice.DiceAnimator.setTrigger, and I'm passing in reset for the parameter. This will transition the dice back from the blend tree to its looping roll animation. Next, I wanted to reset the highlighted text object. So I have currentDice.face, and I'm passing in the roll value, and I'm calling the reset function. I'm passing in true because it has a bool parameter. And the last two lines are to disable the reset button and to re-enable the roll button. Now there is more code here, but like I said, I'll talk about this code in a future video. So with that, I saved my code and went back to Unity. Inside Unity, I just needed to set a couple variables. Here I've got my roll button and my reset button, and then these two variables I'll talk about in a future video. For each dice object, I have the dice script attached. I needed to set its animator, and I needed to set its dice value. Then came the tedious part where I had to set this face array for each dice. And to do this, I just had to select each one of these sphere objects and drag it into the array. But I needed to make sure that they were in the correct order. And so for some of the dice, I renamed the sphere object to its numerical value. When I got to D20, it was a bit of a pain. And there you have it. That's all the code behind the animated roll mechanic. Now I'll play through the project and you can see it one more time. So here I have my D20 and it's currently looping through that spin animation. And as soon as I click the dice, it then switches over to the blend tree and it picks a face at random, and that number highlights yellow. And here you can see it with the animator window active. So here it's looping through this spin animation or rolling animation. And as soon as I click, it transitions over to the blend tree. And the state is set to 0.6842. And if I go into the blend tree, here you can see that the threshold for D20 roll 14 is 0.6842. And there you go. That's everything that I have to show you in this video on how I created the animated roll mechanic. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or suggestions, make sure you leave them in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe to my channel so you can be up to date with all my latest videos. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.